I'm sorry, what am I being volunteered for now?
It's just saying that if Paul Downing doesn't jump in real soon here, that maybe somebody will want to volunteer you to chair until he jumps in.
I'd like to volunteer. John Banks is the honorary official interim emergency chair.
I'll second that.
Well, I think if we just continue talking and delay for a few minutes, maybe our real chair will join us. But in the meantime, I would like to provide a big welcome for Sarah as our newest member of the commission. I've had the pleasure of working with Sarah off and on over the years on various forestry type stuff. So I would like to provide a welcome for Sarah. Thank you for joining MITSC, Sarah.
Thank you. Still need to go through the judiciary hearing, but I'm looking forward to joining this group.
Well, at least you won't have to, explain why you're not a woman, like a lot of our other commissioners had to do.
No, that I won't.
Okay, we've got Kevin. And well, guess we're missing who are we? We're missing Matt and Bert, right? And Paul Downing.
Bert is on.
Bert is on?
Bert is on.
Hey!
Oh, there's Bert. Okay. Hi, Bert.
Am I muted? Oh, can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Hello. It looks like you're in front of the office, but not at the same time.
Yeah, I'm at a picnic table. The weather's been really nice down in Truscott. So,
Yeah, why don't we go ahead and get started with, I guess we can do some introductions. I don't know how you want to do that, but I will start and then I will pass it to somebody and that person can introduce themselves and then pass it on. So I'm John Banks. I'm one of the Penobscot Nation representatives to this fine group. And welcome everybody. And I will pass the baton to Mr. Checkaway.
Am I on?
Yes.
I've got the high technology set. I'm not used to it, but yes, I'm Bob Checkaway, a state appointee. I live in Freeport where it's still snowing. I will be here, but I have to turn my video off or I start buffering others. And you may have noticed I broke the internet yesterday in New England. But Sarah Medina, I'm looking forward to meeting you. I've heard great things about you. Welcome to the commission.
Thank you.
And why don't I turn it over to you?
Okay, I'm Sarah Medina. I'm a retired forester. Worked with Seven Islands Land Company. John Cashwell knows me quite well. I have had a lot of experience with working on various committees. I'm looking forward to joining this group. I only have general knowledge of MITSC, but I've been doing some reading, and I think I'm someone who can work well with your group and look forward to giving it a go. I'm not sure who to turn it over to next.
Well, I'll go ahead. I'm Richard Rosen. I'm a state commissioner. I live in Bucksport. I had been a retailer for many years with a family-owned business. Served as a member of the legislature and a state commissioner for a period of time, and currently am serving as Vice President and CFO at Maine Maritime Academy. Very nice to see you, Sarah. Welcome.
Thank you.
You
I'm
wanna
John
hand it off?
Cashwell. I'll do it. John Cashwell, State Commissioner from Bangor, Maine. And welcome, Sarah. I don't need an introduction, as you said. Known you for 30 some odd years, and you're going to be a great addition.
Thanks. Always fun to work with you, John.
Oh, yeah.
I guess I'll take the next one. Hello, everyone. I'm Bert Polchis, Commissioner of Penobscot Nation, along with John Banks. Of course, I can never fit his shoes; they're too small. But anyhow, I'd like to welcome everyone here and welcome Sarah. Good to meet you here, even though it's like in this little tiny screen. But I'll look forward to our meeting here. Anyhow, welcome.
Thanks.
Yeah, I don't mind going. Good morning, everyone. My name is Zeke Croft McDonald. I'm one of the commissioners, the tribal commissioners for the Holton Band of Maliseets. I'm currently living in Fredericton, New Brunswick, getting my master's in history at the University of New Brunswick, focusing on Wabanaki, Wolastoqey Treaty history. Yeah, a little bit about me.
I can go. I'm Sam St. John, Commissioner from the Holton Band of Maliseet Indians. I work in our Water Resources Department.
Hello.
Good morning,
Sarah,
everyone.
Whoops. Go ahead, James.
Good morning, everyone. James Cody, State Commissioner. Welcome, Sarah. Glad to have you on board. And I'll just note that this is my 6th Zoom meeting of the morning so far.
Jeez.
And still counting.
Sarah, hello. It's a pleasure to meet you. I'm Kevin Hancock. I'm a state commissioner and I live in Casco.
I think we've got.
Okay, it looks like, well, Sandy, we need to hear from Sandra.
I don't know about needing to hear from me. Well, I'll turn my video on. Hi, everybody. As you can see, my computer keeps notifying me that I'm unstable, so I kind of look like a hologram. So that's my excuse for today. My name is Sandra Yarmel, and I am a tribal commissioner representing my tribe, Passamaquoddy at Zibayik. I work for Wabanaki Public Health as a data specialist. And welcome aboard, Sarah. It's nice to have another woman on the commission.
Thanks.
So that looks like all the commissioners have introduced themselves. Now we have some other guests. We have John Diefenbacher Krall, who would be like to have you introduce yourself, John.
As John Banks said, I'm John Diefenbacher Krall. I'm the former executive director of the Maine Indian Tribal State Commission from 2005 through February 2017, and additional 2 years of consulting work. I live in Old Town.
Thank you, John. We're also pleased to have some members of the legislature joining us today, I see. We have the representative from Passamaquoddy tribe, Rena Newell, and Ann Perry. I believe you're still in the legislature. So why don't you go ahead, Rena, and introduce yourself.
Good morning, John Banks. Good morning, everyone. I would really like to defer to Representative Perry, and I'll follow her up if that's okay with you.
That's fine.
Okay, good morning. Glad I could make it. I'm Representative Ann Perry, and I represent House District 140. which includes Indian Township, Baileyville, Barron, Calais, Charlotte, Robinson, Perry, Pembroke, and Pleasant Point.
Thank you, Representative Perry. And go ahead, Rena, Representative Newell.
Good morning. Thank you for having me at your meeting today. My name, of course, Rena Newell. I am the Passamaquoddy Tribal Representative, representing Indian Township and Pleasant Point, and good to be here today, and welcome to Sarah as well.
Thank you, Representative Newell. We also have one of our consultants joining us today, Mr. Judd Esty Kendall. Why don't you go ahead, Judd, and tell us a little bit about yourself and your involvement here with MITSC.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Judd Esty Kendall. I'm an attorney and a researcher for MITSC on a couple of projects, and I'm really here today just in case there are any questions about either of the projects I've been involved in. And also just to listen because the general discourse is fascinating on these meetings, as I'm sure you all know.
Thank you, Judd. We also have, I think that covers just about everybody. We have a person named Ann Diefenbacher-Kroll joining us, I believe. If Ann wants to introduce herself, that would be fine.
Hi, I'm Ann Diefenbacher-Kroll. I'm married to John Diefenbacher-Kroll, and this is our son, Nick.
Hey, Nick. Hi, Ann. Thank you for joining us. And I think we've covered everybody here. And I will turn it over to our esteemed Executive Director, Mr. Paul Tebow, to get us started here on our agenda. Thank you.
Thanks, John. And join in welcoming Sarah to the commission. First thing we need to do is review the agenda. I have a couple of suggestions for how we might want to rearrange. Since we have John Diefenbacher-Kroll and family members on, and we're going to be having a piece where we recognize John for his service to the commission, I'm recommending that we move that up to immediately after the managing director report. And so that we can do that, and then they won't have to suffer through the rest of the agenda items. That sound okay to folks? John, sound okay?
Yeah, that's great. Great, Paul. Go right ahead.
And I guess otherwise, you'll on the agenda, there's the final item on the agenda, 7B, was a presentation from the Maine Broadband Coalition, but the fellow who had contacted me from the coalition has not responded to my invite to make the presentation today. So I'm suggesting that we probably want to defer that to the next meeting, because without the input from him, I'm not sure how we would constructively discuss it. And I would also just suggest that the other new business item regarding the proposed legislation on the Kineo band, and this was really suggested by Ambassador Dana, that we just consolidate that with item 6D, which is the general agenda item regarding tribal state legislative proposals.
Hey, Paul.
Yeah.
I hate to interrupt you, but I got a message from one of the remote participants that said that the volume is not as loud as it could be for people that are listening in. And I don't know the technology here, if we can increase the volume or what.
Well, our IT man, Dylan, is monitoring the meeting, and I'm hoping that he's listening. And if there's a way to enhance the audio, I'm hoping that Dylan will do that.
John, if I can intrude, I've probably got the worst technical quality of anybody. I can make out everybody else, but Paul, your voice is trailing. You might stay close to the mic.
Is that better?
Oh, yeah, for me anyway.
Right. Then maybe I'm the problem to begin with. Okay, so, but hopefully Dylan is monitoring, and if there's something he can do to enhance it, he will do that.
Well, he did flash a message that he heard you and he's increased the volume.
Okay, well, thanks, John. So if everybody's okay with those agenda changes, the next item would be to review the minutes from the December 14th meeting, which were sent to all of you. That was, as you recall, a special meeting to pull together the work plan. So the issue is to review and approve the minutes from December 14th.
Go ahead, Bob. Take your mute. You're muted, Bob.
Yeah, sorry about that. Sarah Bendina is listed as a guest, and we probably shouldn't finger her for having been at that meeting because she'll get deputized to do something. She was introduced in absentia, but I think not there, right, Sarah? Oh, now you're muted.
Sarah, you need to unmute yourself. Sarah, you need to unmute.
I had my audio on so that I could listen and see who some of the members were for an introduction to myself, but I was not technically there.
So noted.
Any other comments on the minutes?
Move they be accepted.
Motion by Bob, seconded by Bert to approve the minutes. All those in favor, say aye or raise your hand.
Aye.
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 I see that our esteemed chairman has joined the meeting. Welcome, Paul.
Hello, everyone.
We were just getting started and we've just gone through one agenda item. We just approved the minutes, so it's all yours, my friend.
Give me a second. Did you log in, Meg?
We're seeing and hearing you, Paul.
Yeah, no, I'm sorry. I'm talking to the chief. She's talking.
You're muted, Paul.
Yeah, sorry. I'm talking to Chief. She's trying to get the link, and somehow or another, it's their email system down here is trashed. So I apologize. Give me just a second.
Well, Paul's wrestling. John, would you like me to move on to the managing director report?
I'm sorry, Paul. Did you ask him? Mr. Tebow, did you
Yes,
ask
Paul.
a question?
Yes. Are you ready to go?
No, you just keep moving forward. I'll jump in a second. We're just trying to log in.
Okay, then I'd suggest that we go ahead and have the managing director report. I've, as usual, submitted a written report to all of you, which includes the financial piece and then the other items. So I'm not going to go through that word for word. I'd rely on the written report, but as usual, there's a few things that I would mention specifically from the report. You have the three usual, reports for the current month, for the year to date, and the balance sheet. As of yesterday, we have approximately $7,500 in the checking account and approximately $162,000 in the savings. Since the last meeting, I've learned that the governor's proposed biennial budget includes flat funding for MITSC for the 2-year biennium, not an increase. But honestly, given the current situation, I wasn't real optimistic that we would succeed in getting the increase, but we are in for continued funding at $111,614 annually for the 2 years. Just to give you a rough idea of where that, where we are in terms of the big financial picture, based on the way things have been going over the first 6 months of the fiscal year, I believe we will still have a significant carryover into the next fiscal year, although it will be smaller than the carryover last year. My best guess at this point is that we'll probably carry over 80 to 85,000 into the next fiscal year. Combined with that flat funding, that would allow us to continue essentially the same level of operation into the next fiscal year. By the end of this calendar year.
Well, what?
By the end of
Tom's sister went to business with them. And they thought he might have been around her.
By the end of this calendar year, with flat funding, if we don't identify some other source of income, the commission will at that point need to address whether or not some changes need to be made, because we won't have sufficient funding to continue at that level indefinitely. There is some good news on that front. I was contacted by a representative of the Broadreach Foundation who had listened in to our last meeting and then reached out to me to discuss the possibility of the Broadreach Foundation funding one or more special projects that MITSC might identify. I'll be pursuing that further, but their next cycle, as I understand it, would be in the fall, in October. And so we can be looking at, creating a proposal to them for, possible funding of one or more projects. This is the group that provided some funding to MITSC a number of years ago. I believe it was $10,000, and when John Diefenbacher Kroll was executive director, it provided some help for John to continue doing his work at a time when MITSC was facing a funding crunch. So that's the financial. I also want to mention the audit. It's basically done. Pat and I had the exit interview, or whatever that's called, with the auditors, remotely yesterday. There are no deficiencies, and they believe that the whole thing will be wrapped up in 2 to 3 weeks. So another good audit for us. And I would note that we really owe a lot of thanks to Pat Mallar, who has been handling our bookkeeping and accounting and carrying the ball on the audit, because she's really done good work for MITSC. So that's the financial piece. Any questions on the financials? If not, I would go on and just direct you to the other piece of my written managing director report. I'm not gonna, go through what's written in the report. I was going to specifically note the addition of Sarah Medina, and we've already introduced ourselves to her. And as she noted, we don't, well, she may have noted, we don't know yet when the confirmation hearing will be held, but I have been in touch with the co-chairs of the Judiciary Committee to encourage them to, have that confirmation hearing as soon as they can arrange it so that we can get the commission back to full speed, back to, full strength. So otherwise, I would just rely on the written managing director report unless there are any questions. If there aren't any, then at this point, if it's okay with everyone, I suggest we're going to move on to recognizing John Diefenbacher Krall for his service to MITSC. We are going to be also honoring former commissioners at the next meeting, but at this meeting, we're focusing on former staff. And since John was with MITSC for so long, he is the only former staff member that we are honoring today. I want to apologize in advance to John and his family for the limitations that are imposed, by the Zoom format. We had wanted to have, a dinner, a more, a real event where things could be said in person and presented in person, but we're, going to do the best we can with this format. And I guess I should check. Is everybody hearing me a little better now? You hearing me okay? All right. John, we want you to know that even though we can't do it right now, we are going to be presenting you with a framed certificate recognizing your long service to MITSC, and also be presenting you with a gift. And the gift is going to be a copy of Matthew Fletcher's treatise on federal Indian law, which I thought you might appreciate having. So ideally, we would have had everybody sign it, but I don't think we're going to be able to do that under the circumstances. So John served MITSC as executive director for 12 and a half years, as he said, from September of 2005 to February of 2017. And after that, he continued as a consultant until February of 2019, overlapping for a couple of months with me. And even after that time, John has continued to readily volunteer his time to help me and MITSC through the transition period. John, or JDK, as we call him often, has devoted his life to community service and social change, working for environmental, multi-issue, and intergovernmental groups in 3 states, in addition to his extensive volunteer service. Currently, in his volunteer life, John chairs the Episcopal Diocese of Maine Committee on Indian Relations. John has studied, written, and spoken widely concerning the doctrine of discovery and the impact that it still has on Indian tribes and Indian people in Maine and around the United States. He was the principal co-author of the principal author of a resolution to repudiate the doctrine of discovery adopted by the Episcopal Church's General Convention in 2009. That Episcopal Church action inspired a number of other religious bodies and organizations to take similar actions. John was the official representative of the Diocese of Maine at the UN Permanent Forum on Indigenous Issues in 2012, at which he delivered another influential presentation on the doctrine of discovery. Now I want to say a little bit about John's work at MITSC. And I hope that commissioners who were on the commission at the time will feel free to jump in and add, comments on that. But I can address a number of things that I personally know that John was very instrumental in working on at MITSC. For one, the Tribal State Work Group. back in, I believe, 07 and 08, which John staffed and wrote the extensive report on, which a report that we still refer to often. John was instrumental in creating the assemblies of governors and chiefs that happened back in that same time frame. He's played a critical role over the years in making the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People a part of MITSC culture, something that, the principles of which MITSC really tries to respect. And John had a lot to do with making that a reality at MITSC. John's was involved over the years with many natural resources issues, which perhaps, John Banks or others might be able to comment on that. John was also very involved in efforts to eliminate offensive mascots and nicknames, to promote Wabanaki studies in the schools of Maine. And he offered tremendous support for the Truth and Reconciliation Commission during his time at MITSC. So all in all, I have to say that John, in addition to that, I would say that for me personally, John has been a tremendous help. When I came on as managing director 2 years ago, John was extremely helpful to me in the transition and has continued to offer me help anytime I have asked, and I truly appreciate it. And with that, I would open it up to any commissioners who want to weigh in with comments about John's service to MITSC.
I'd be happy to do that. For starters, I had the opportunity. I don't know when I first met John Diefenbacher-Krall. We've had a friendship for a long time, and I had the honor of traveling back and forth to Augusta with John during one of the state's Environmental Priorities Coalition proceedings. And we got to know each other quite well and have a lot of great discussion. And I think I may have played a role in talking him into considering to be the executive director of this fine organization. So I really want to thank John for his many years of service, not only to MITSC, but to society in general. He's the type of individual that just really cares about things, people, organizations, and it shows in his work. He has, in my experience working with John, he has, stepped up to the plate every time he's been asked, regardless of if it's directly related to what he's doing or whatever. So thank you, John, for your years of service to this organization. You did a great job. You picked up where Diana Scully had kind of left off and managed this group of folks, which is often challenging. And you did a great job, John. So thank you for your many years of service.
Bert, and then Bob.
Well, John, it's been awesome knowing you and having, had the chance to work with you. A lot of things went from the time that I came on this commission. There's nothing that I can say that ever, I don't know how to describe, what you mean, what I feel that you mean to this commission, and it was a hard time to think, for me personally, when, we had no choice, that you parted ways with the commission. But to me, you never really did, because, there's times even, where I've, had the opportunity to call you even after you were done with the commission. But the whole time you've been on this commission, I mean, from day one, you've been a great help. You've been more than willing to feed me the information that I needed in order to do my job. And I've seen that, what you put forth for every one of our commissioners in a heartfelt way. It really means something to you. That's what I always saw. It means something to you. It wasn't just a job, but you did the job and you did it in an excellent way, And to me, to have somebody, being in the position that, as an executive director for this commission, to represent who we are in any of those meetings that you or we have attended is amazing. And through those years, we've become friends, and in my heart, one of my best friends. Through what we've gone through, we've shared things about, even feelings, as to how things are affecting us, the, all this legislation, all the political stuff, and how it affects us spiritually as well. You understood it. You also shared, and to me, I kind of see you more than just a friend, but more, like family. And I think, a lot of the people, that we've had on this commission kind of grew into that as well. Some are actually family. But anyway, and your wife, I've only had a couple opportunities to see her, but I know that family means a lot to you as well. We've seen the ups and downs, health wise and all that kind of stuff. And, because I feel you as family, it affects me too. And I send my love, my prayers for all, the well-being of you and your family, from here on out. So I look forward to having a chance to talk with you some more. This COVID thing kind of keeps us at bay, but you're not that far from Indian Island. So I know where you live. But I want to thank you from here, from my heart, for everything that you've done and what you've represented and what you still continue to represent. Thank you. And I thank your wife for allowing us to borrow you for a while.
Thanks for it. Bob Checkaway.
There we go. I'm unmuted. And for those of you who haven't read the chat screen, whatever that is, Paul Downing says he's got technical problems over there. Says something about our internet here is ridiculous, but he may be back. I didn't strictly overlap with John DK, but I have dealt with him for several years over this MITSC business. And what the rest of you may not realize, especially all the newer commissioners, is that in addition to the nice published reports that we have turned out from time to time, although we may not get a lot of public view from our work, this commission has an archive of records like you wouldn't believe. It has never been digitized. The early part of it, or some part of it, is at the University of Maine. I don't believe any part of that has been digitized. Parts of it remain in boxes in the MITSC office, but basically the entire archive of this commission resides in JDK, a that of which I was reminded doing the brief for the en banc stage of the River case. I mean, we had to cull. Well, it's 40 years. It's 40 years of records. None of it computerized or digitized, and most of that credit goes, most if not all of it goes to JDK. John, I have to thank you personally for that one. One more note that you might, the rest of you might not know, that in addition to being a sulfur and brimstone preacher in the pulpit of the Episcopal Church, JDK was also a sports writer. James Cody, if you're still on the line, you and he should talk sometime because you're both sports writers, even if you're maybe a generation apart. I won't drag it out. John, thanks very much.
Bob. Is there anyone else want to jump in?
Paul, I'll just jump in and congratulate John on this recognition. I came on as commissioner after your departure, so we did not serve together in this role. But in my former state work as a member of the legislature, I certainly, any number of times, was on the receiving end of your work related to MITSC, but prior to that, with the environmental work as well. And I can attest firsthand that that when you come forward and present an argument, it is always intellectually challenging and forces the recipient or the audience for that argument to think. And we can't get away without being forced to think about whatever the argument is that you're putting forward. The other takeaway for me from your work is that being passive doesn't make change. It takes passion and it takes action. And you have also exhibited that over your career. So congratulations for the recognition.
Any other comments? If not, I want to just close this honoring ceremony by noting again that John worked tirelessly for MITSC for all those years, and he truly deserves, and I think today has received, the heartfelt gratitude of the commission. And maybe we could unmute ourselves for a second and give John a round of applause.
Here, here, here.
Jesus.
Congratulations.
Well, that's the first time I've heard that through Zoom.
Well, so on behalf of the commission, John, I thank you and your family for joining us today to give us this chance to give you the recognition you deserve.
Paul Downing and Paul Tebow, I'll only be honored like this once. So I was wondering, I did prepare something that I'd like to say to the commission. Is that possible for me to read
Yes,
that?
yes,
absolutely. So
Go for
it. John Banks, thank you. You're actually the person who called me on behalf of the commission, offering me the job. And, that made it even a little more special because we did have that relationship from when we served together on the Maine Environmental Priorities Project. And I love talking about fishing with you many times. Bert, that was classical you. Thank you for that expression of love. And I think when you hear the remarks that I'm going to make, that's going to dovetail with some of the references you made to spirituality. Bob, thank you very much. That is something I've prided myself. Several places I've worked. I do believe in information. I believe in truth. I believe in records. I think they're important. And I did try to make sure that that collection was properly housed in the archives. I mean, I did literally transport that to the University of Maine archives, and worked to make sure that collection of documents was secured. And Richard, that was a very wonderful tribute. We have different points of view, I think, on many issues. I will have to say, I remember you showing up in Orrington many times as the community talked about what to do with that closed chlor-alkali plant. I have to say, you always exhibited a lot of class and decorum, something that's too lacking in public life these days. So I always appreciate that. And though maybe we would disagree, but you always did it with respect and honor. And I think that could be an example. And I also, I'll salute you. It hasn't gotten much attention, but I really appreciate you as a citizen of the state of Maine. You chose to share budget information that cost you your job. It's not easy to give up your job on a point of principle, but you did that. So thank you for doing that. I did prepare a statement. I want to thank you for recognizing my service today. In college, I spent a considerable amount of time thinking about what type of work I was going to do in my life. And I was highly influenced by my mother, a smart person who somewhat of a trailblazer. I think she might have been the first computer program or female computer programmer at this large Fortune 500 company. And though lots of people, saluted her for that achievement, she was really unhappy because it didn't fulfill her. She did that because she was a breadwinner for our household. She needed to work. But I took that example of thinking, if I'm going to be spending 40 years of my life doing something, it's got to be something that I enjoy and something that's important. So that's been something that I've followed. And for me, that's really meant doing social change work. You've heard some of the references, especially you commissioners who are new and don't know me. But for me, my work must align with my values. And my faith is important to me. I was baptized in the Catholic Church as an infant, and during baptism, a child's parents and godparents pledged to bring up the child to keep God's commandments as Christ taught us by loving God and our neighbor. And I view devoting oneself to social change as fulfilling God's charge to us to love our neighbor. And as an adult, I was received in the Episcopal Church. And in the Episcopal baptism liturgy, the people present for the service are asked if they will strive for justice and peace among all people and respect the dignity of every human being. So I take that pledge very seriously, and it guides me in my life's decisions. I view the work of the Maine Indian Tribal State Commission as consistent with that pledge to strive for justice and peace among all people and respect the dignity of every human being. Maine Attorney General Richard Cohen, I think, effectively captured the significance of the Settlement Act when he testified before the U.S. Senate Select Committee on Indian Affairs in July 1980, and I read to you some of his testimony. I cannot promise to you the adoption of this settlement will usher in a period of uninterrupted harmony between Indians and non-Indians in Maine. But I can tell you, however, that because we sat down at a conference table as equals and jointly determined our future relationship, in my view, there exists between the state and the tribes a far greater mutual respect and understanding than has ever existed in the past in the state of Maine. I can also tell you, if this matter is litigated over a period of years, the atmosphere in Maine certainly will be quite different. I cannot put a price tag on human relationships, nor am I suggesting that this factor alone justifies enactment of the legislation before you. I am asking only that you give appropriate consideration to the historical significance, not only of the settlement itself, but also of the manner in which it was reached. So sadly, Attorney General Cohen's words have proved prophetic. Numerous court cases have ensued between the Wabanaki and Maine state government. The Wabanaki-Maine relationship has been characterized for far more during the last 40 and a half years since President Carter signed the act in October 1980 by strain and disagreement instead of mutual respect and understanding. We know that many civic and public relationships in our lives right now are described as strained, fraught, even broken. People opine every day about the need for dialogue and truly hearing people who hold different points of view than ones the listener may hold. The Maine Indian Tribal State Commission has tremendous potential to enhance, perhaps even heal, tribal state relations. What A.G. Cohn said about the manner in which the settlement agreement was reached is so important. We sat down at a conference table as equals and jointly determined our future relationship. For 155 years, the state of Maine dominated the relationship with the Wabanaki. That dramatically changed when the First Circuit Court of Appeals affirmed Judge Janew's decision in Passamaquoddy versus Morton. To the detriment of the Wabanaki-Maine relationship, the state of Maine prioritized restoration of its jurisdictional control over the Settlement Act negotiators. Settler court decisions have strengthened that control. Every day I held the MITSC executive director position, I strove to restore justice to the Wabanaki-Maine relationship. Without a just relationship, tension, conflict, acrimony, and dispute will characterize the relationship, and we've all witnessed that. The people who lose the most from the conflict are the poorest settlers and Wabanaki individuals. So much can be gained from mutual respect and prosperity. MITSC can provide a tremendous service to Wabanaki-Maine relations as being a respected, authoritative place, equally represented by Wabanaki and state representatives, to fashion potential policy solutions that are mutually beneficial to the tribes in the state. That vision inspired me. I hope it will inspire you. I appreciated the opportunity to serve.
I'll jump in. John, thanks, and apologize for not having properly introduced your remarks. But again, on behalf of the commission, I want to thank you and your family for taking the time today to participate in this recognition moment for you. And I think John Banks wants to add something.
In typical JDK fashion, he has left us with some fantastic words of wisdom. So thank you for those encouraging words, John. And I would ask you, if you're comfortable, if you would care to submit your parting document to the record here, so it becomes part of MITSC's permanent record.
I will do that, John. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, John. Paul Downing, are you with us?
Yes, but it keeps breaking up, and I'm not sure if I'm coming through clearly. I switched over to my phone. Is this somewhat better?
Yes, I'm hearing you real good right now.
Okay, so I'm kind of lost where we're at on the agenda. So if you could continue to guide the process, I'll be a supporter, just because I feel almost disconnected with this. And I don't know what's going on with our internet down here.
Okay, Paul, I can continue. And this seems like a lame item to follow up the honoring ceremony we just had, but we have the pending amendment to the bylaws regarding stipends and expenses. And as you may recall, this was proposed a couple meetings back. Richard Rose suggested some changes to the exact wording, which I have sent to you all. And since it has been reviewed at a bylaws meeting before, I think it's appropriate now under our bylaws that you can actually enact a change if you choose to the bylaws. So I guess it would be in order for a motion and any discussion. Anybody prepared to make a motion regarding the proposed change?
I'll move the proposal.
Paul, could you quickly read the actual proposal, because I don't seem to find it right here in my paperwork.
Right. Okay. Well, I'll read the pertinent changes. It would be amended to read that the commission members are entitled to receive $75 per day for their services and to reimbursement for reasonable expenses, including travel. The MITSC bylaws currently state as follows: per diems and expenses commission. Let me rephrase that. It would now read, per diems and expenses, commission members shall be paid $75 per day for their services and shall be reimbursed for reasonable expenses, including mileage at the applicable rate for business use of an automobile set by the U.S. Internal Revenue Service. Services that are eligible for per diem payments shall include participation in commission meetings and commission committee meetings. For purposes of per diem payments, remote attendance at commission meetings and committee meetings will be treated the same as in-person attendance. Reasonable documented expenses will be reimbursed by the commission for commission meetings and committee meetings, including mileage at the applicable rate for business use of an automobile set by the U.S. Internal Revenue Service. Reasonable documented expenses for attendance by commissioners at other MITSC-related proceedings and events may be reimbursed on request if authorized by the chairperson. So the crux of this change is really that last part that deals with expenses for attendance by commissioners at other MITSC-related proceedings and events being reimbursed on request if authorized by the chairperson. And the other substantive part of the change is that it would provide for per diems as well as expenses for, in addition to commission meetings, also meetings of commission committees. As it is currently drafted, it does not provide for stipends for MITSC-related proceedings other than commission meetings and committee meetings, but it would provide for reimbursement of expenses for those events if authorized by the chairperson.
Thank you, Paul. I don't know, was that Richard made a motion?
Yes.
Okay, I'll second.
So is there discussion of the amendment as it has been revised? If not, I guess, John Banks, do you want to call a vote on the motion?
Sure. Call the vote. All those in favor, say aye or raise your hand or indicate.
Aye.
Aye. Is there any opposition? Are there any abstentions? Hearing none, this motion is passed.
Thank you. The next agenda item would be to simply review the printed work plan that I sent around. This emerged, as you know, over a period of 3 meetings, the last of which was December 14th. And I took the products from those meetings and put them into a typed work plan and sent that around. It was sent as a draft, so I guess I'm requesting at this point that the commission indicate whether it's, approved and is no longer a draft. Would there be a motion to simply, approve the work plan as it has now been drafted?
Motion to approve.
Is there a second?
Yeah, I'll second that, check away.
And John, since I think you are effectively standing in for Paul, can you call a vote on that?
Hey, Paul.
Oh,
Just
first, I'm sorry, discussion.
one tiny amendment here. Just my name's spelled incorrectly. That's all. Just
Oh.
it's not a capital D in McDonald, lowercase d.
Oh, okay.
Tiny little amendment there.
Yeah. Any other comments? And John, you want to go ahead?
I would ask Paul as our chair. I think he can hear us. And
I can.
participate. So go ahead, Paul. I just don't feel right jumping in here.
I'll even try to start the video and see if it stays connected. So having a motion set forth on the review of the work plan, having a motion seconded and discussion, I'll put it to a vote to approve the work plan and of course to be refined. All in favor say aye.
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 And if there's
Aye.
any opposition, now's the time to set your oppositional vote. Hearing none, I say that the motion is approved and we go to the next item, which according to mine, Paul Thibault, it's sustenance fishing study update. Sustenance fishing study update.
Correct, Paul. And we have Judd S.D. Kendall with us to, I hope will jump in and give an update on the sustenance study.
Good morning again, everyone. There is as you know, there's a research team of myself, Tony Sutton, and Lexi Anderson. Most of the effort to date has been spent on research and the early drafting of the report, trying to put some of the information we've gathered into a report form. There is a lot of information out there, technical scientific information concerning Maine's sea-run fisheries. The project is to study the effects of state policy on non-Indian lands as it affects sustenance fishing in Wabanaki waters or MITSC regulated waters. And, I'm not being a fisherman myself, I have come to see that the state of the fisheries is really quite dire, moving from a point where the sea-run fisheries really were a significant part of sustaining the entire population of Maine, even well into the settler era, and now really struggle to sustain themselves. The fish struggle to sustain themselves, much less any significant portion of the population or Wabanaki people. So, in addition to integrating the scientific information, the information we've collected, we're meeting on Friday to try to set up some focus groups for Wabanaki people to talk about their experience, their memories, and their personal definitions of what sustenance means, because we have also found out that I think the meaning of the word sustenance, or the concept of sustenance, is very different for Wabanaki people than it is for the state of Maine. So there's some challenges in setting up focus groups in the Zoom era as opposed to the meeting era, but our researchers meeting on Friday is going to have that as a primary topic to try to plan those out. That's sort of where we are. I'm glad to answer any questions people have.
Judd, when you and I met, we had talked about you were perhaps going to follow up with some interviews with various people, one of them being our fisheries biologist at Penobscot, who was going to provide some further information about our work with the state of Maine fisheries agencies. Did that interview happen? Did you follow up with some of those recommendations? Thank
Yep.
you.
Yep, we talked quite a while ago, and that led me. It was good information, and also led me to other places. I've talked fairly recently, probably a month and a half ago, to Sean Ledwin at the state. He was in charge of the Sea Run Fisheries program as well, and got a lot of good information from him. So there's a number of interlocking interviews we've done. So I should have mentioned, that's a good point actually, John, that in addition to the sort of research of the scientific information, we've done enough with individuals from the trust and the state. There probably will be more as time goes on, because it's always a intertwined process of knowing what to interview someone about based on what you've learned. So the more you learn, the more that you alter your approach to interviews. So anyway, yes, I did follow up actually pretty quickly after we talked with that, and we'll probably be interviewing other people in tribal government and state government as we go along.
So Judd, my question would be, did that include the Scudic River keepers? Did they get involved?
I've not talked to anyone in the Scudic River keepers yet. I talked to Ed Bassett for quite a while. He's the only Passamaquoddy person I've talked with so far. Yeah, there will be some more interviews as time goes on. And right now we're going to try to focus on getting some focus group type interviews with not so much people in the fisheries business or in tribal government, but just tribal members, particularly elders whose memories will span quite a period of time. And the fisheries have been challenged for 150 years or more. More than that, almost 200 years since the dams started really being built on the rivers. But there's also been substantial changes and decline even since the 1950s, 1980s. So hearing what people have to say about how they've used the fisheries, how the fisheries have sustained them or not sustained them, I think is going to be a really important voice in the study. So that's our next area.
Anybody else?
Yeah, Judd, you mentioned something about in these in this study, you're going to be looking at, trying to find out, how people define sustenance. That's, I know in the past we've had several discussions amongst, I think with some of our commissioners, with just people within our communities, and are you looking at trying to, place a, show a difference between what is referred to as sustenance, subsistence, or commerce? Because one thing, I think I've stated several times before, and I've heard elders in the past refer to the fact that there really was no difference. We didn't have a word for it, first of all, but the way that though we didn't see it as a form of commerce, commercial fisheries or hunting, whatever, we did trade. We relied on various things depending on our location, which maybe other tribes didn't have access to. So yes, if you look at sustenance, we're going to feed ourselves, right? Um, whether it's fishing or hunting or gathering. But at the same time, because we're in areas that other tribes, didn't have access to those things, yet they had access to things that we didn't have access to, and so we traded. It was just a thing that was done. When you start looking at the definitions in the English language, then in a sense that's a form of commerce, which also provided sustenance and subsistence to our people as well. So I think, are you going to be looking at that? Are you going to try to put examples out there for that?
Bert, the answer is yes. I mean, in addition to learning a lot about fish, I'm also learning a lot about uh, people's relationship to those fish, including Wabanaki people and settlers. But there's a tendency by the state of Maine in the white population to make try to make definitions precise. So there are some definitions in the law about which sections of rivers are supposed to be allowed for sustenance, and that has to do with pollution. And there's definition in some state law about what sustenance means. But it became apparent to me pretty early on in this that there really was no Wabanaki in the Wabanaki languages, no word that was the equivalent of sustenance. And I ended up consulting with Roger Paul, who did his linguistics graduate study down at MIT fairly recently. And the idea of the concept of sustenance in the Wabanaki languages is much broader than simply catching fish to bring home for dinner. Okay, it has to do with sustaining the culture, the tribe, the people, and it's indistinguishable from sustenance as solely a food concept. So yes, I've gotten some excellent comments from a number of people about what sustenance means to the Wabanaki people, including John Banks, who was actually quite eloquent about that concept. And that is definitely going to be a part of what we present in the end, because the implementing act uses the word sustenance but doesn't define it. And if the different sides are approaching it with very different definitions, that's an item of concern and an item where a lot of discussion needs to take place. The point of the focus groups is to get a broader perspective from tribal people as to what sustenance means and what it has meant over the course of time in relation to the sea run fisheries, um, just so we can really present that in the final report. Does that help?
Yes, thank you very much.
This is Sandy. Just to kind of chime in, I wasn't going to say anything, but I sent this to Mr. Checkaway, so I feel like it's important enough to say out loud. And I said that the non-Indigenous definition of sustenance is based on self. And that in and of itself puts it in conflict with sustenance as determined by Wabanaki people. We don't think of things in terms of self. We are inclusive. And so therefore, just the way that we look at things and the way that we define things is drastically different. And I think that causes a lot of conflict and misunderstanding. And then secondly, I hope that as these interviews go on, there is a tribal elder from Zibayig who is an nth generation fisherman who continues to practice. So I'm hoping that those voices get invited and are included in future conversations. Thanks.
Thank you, Sandy. Yeah, that's certainly the intent. We haven't identified people yet, but Tony Sutton will be heading up that project, who's worked, I believe Tony's Passamaquoddy, but he's worked with the tribe on fish issues already and has gotten to know some of the people. So,
well,
yes.
I would like to actually put a bug in your ear and name someone.
Sure.
Frederick J. Moore III, who learned to fish traditionally from Frederick J. Moore II, who learned to fish traditionally from Frederick J. Moore I.
Gotcha. We will follow that up.
Appreciate that. Thank you. And thank you for listening.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure Tony is Passamaquoddy. That's little Susie's son.
That's
He's
my
married to
cousin.
Crystal. Yeah. So I mean, I know he's tribal, but there's a host of others, and as this evolves forward, Judd, I mean, you've got people that were elver fishing back in the 70s, and their perception of sustenance as compared to the elver fishermen today. You know, Donnell Dana, Joe Mitchell. Those are just a couple, and of course Fred. As a kid, watching them elver fish back in the 70s, as compared to what even I'm doing today as an elver fisherman. So I think those discussions are critically important. And as Sandy just alluded to, there is no defining, we don't have that word of sustenance that's geared toward, feeding my family. It's all communal based. So that concept is almost not translatable when you look at the very narrow defined definition that are very narrow focused definition that the state wishes to employ. So I think that those discussions are going to be extremely relevant as your report kind of fleshes out.
Yeah, thanks. I absolutely agree.
I just wanted to add that in my thinking, there's a little bit of a difference between sustenance and subsistence. And I think one of the important differences that sustenance, it comes from the root of the word is sustain. So it's a way of life that tribal folks have sustained themselves. But I think one of the important differences is that when we talk about sustenance, we're also incorporating the responsibility, the stewardship responsibilities for those resources. And it's not just fishing and taking protein home for your family, but it incorporates in the aspect of responsibility and stewardship of those resources, as well as just harvesting. And I think that's important to remember that.
Yeah, thanks. I would note also, one thing I forgot to mention, of course, there was a Canadian Supreme Court case with a Micmac plaintiff. I can't remember the name of the gentleman right now, but where Canada defined sustenance as much broader than that self um, sustaining, the bringing home fish for dinner concept, and um, really defined it as including the trading and the commercial, some of the commercial activity that Bert talked about. So that was an interesting development. It's actually fairly old now, the case. I'm not sure exactly how they put it into practice, but the definition itself is a middle ground between perhaps the state of Maine and the Wabanaki, the way Wabanaki people think of the concept.
Outstanding. So do we have anything further to go over under 6C from any of the other commission members?
Judd,
Hearing-
I
Go
just, sorry, I just, if that court case you're wondering about, a Marshall
Yes.
decision. Yep.
Thank you. Yes, I've written it and looked at it multiple times. I just couldn't remember the gentleman's name.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was an interesting decision. I might actually talk to you a little bit more about that sometime, Zeke. Good to
Yeah,
see you.
sure. Yep.
So hearing none other than the addition of the Marshall decision, which I actually just wrote down. I say we move on to 6D, the tribal state legislative proposals update and presentations. Paul, you kind of had an idea of how you wanted to do this, Thibault?
Yes, and I guess I want to start by noting that we've got folks who've joined us on the Zoom, and I think the first one to join us was Chief Dana from Sabayak. I believe she's on there with us, and Ambassador Molly and Dana from the Penobscot Nation has joined the Zoom, and Representative Chris Babbage from the Kennebec area, Kennebunk area, sorry, and a member of the Judiciary Committee, and I think that's everybody who has joined in since the beginning. What we I guess I should review briefly what the commission did in terms of the work plan and the legislation issue. The discussion in December led to a work plan item that suggests that the commission should explore some broad themes relating to the settlement and the need, whether there's a need to amend the settlement. And those questions were put into the work plan. And I guess just as an introduction, I would state those questions, although they don't deal with the details of specific legislative proposals, which we may hear more about from today. But what the work plan says is an effort will be made to identify broad themes and principles from both the tribes and the state, such as whether the current structure has failed or has become outdated. Does the current structure work to the benefit of the state and or the tribes? Should the basis of the tribal state federal jurisdictional structure in Maine be restored to what it was in the late 1970s after the decisions in the Morton, Bottomley, and Dana cases, that is federal Indian law? How might that decision be informed by the recent and current experience of tribes that are not subject to laws such as restrictive settlement acts and Public Law 280? How should that decision be informed by the actual experience of the Wabanaki tribes as federally recognized tribes in the era of self-determination. So those were the general broad theme questions that came out of our discussion, and I guess they form the background, for for the commission's approach to this and the discussion that we would have today. And those questions have all been provided to Ambassador Dana and Representative Newell and Representative Babbage and Representative Perry. I think I've shared those questions with all of them. And so I guess we're hoping that in addition to talking about some specific legislative proposals that are emerging in this session, that these folks may also be able to offer some thoughts on those broad theme questions. So with that introduction, Paul, I guess I'd turn it to you.
Yes. So with those broad stroke work plans that you just presented, I'm assuming that we should call for a motion to accept. Is that our normal operating, or?
Well, those questions are incorporated into our work plan already.
And we've already adopted those.
Yeah, I was just reciting them as background for this conversation.
Okay. So we'll open up the floor to discussions. Anybody have any concerns, wants and or desires to amend or open that discussion up?
Well, Paul, I mean, I don't want to cut off folks, but I know that with the four, we've got folks who've got short time frames, and I want to make sure that the four folks who've joined us will be able to make some comments.
Well, let's open the floor up to them.
Oh, Rena?
Yes, thank you. I appreciate, the questions, they're very broad. And so I posed the question back, although Paul, you mentioned that you did distribute these to various representatives from both the state and the tribal side. I think I would raise the question on the commission's approach in getting responses, to those questions. I wouldn't anticipate that discussion would complete itself today. Correct me if I'm wrong there, Paul. So I guess my question back would be, moving forward with your work plan, how is the commission going to approach those questions from both the tribal side as well as the state side?
I guess I could respond to that. Yes, Rena, this is just a starting point with it. There's no intention at all that this would be the only time the commission would be talking about this. Those were the general theme, broad theme questions that came out of the work plan discussion, and I have shared them with a number of people up to this point, including those who've joined us today. But the intention is to circulate that, unless the commission decides differently today, the intention would be pursuant to the work plan to continue to circulate those questions and seek input from numerous other people, on those broad themes. That's my understanding of what the commission intended to do. Having said that, I also want to say that we're hoping to use this time today to also get some specific information, about legislative proposals that are currently, in the works in this session. So it's not the intention to cut that off But we did have those broad theme questions identified as part of our work plan.
Thank you, Paul.
Representative Perry.
Good afternoon. Thank you. As part of the ad hoc group that really worked with the proposed legislation that came out of judiciary in last session, which got lost in the pandemic, I do believe that Rachel Talbot Ross is reintroducing that bill to move forward. In many ways, I don't think it goes far enough. I think that there are a number of things that have happened that might allow us to have a voice. And there is a permanent commission that has been developed on racial equity and tribal equity, which I think helps give a voice to some of the things that we need to do in terms of the relationship. I firmly believe that MITSC should have more of a presence and more power, quite honestly, than it does now, and be more of a presence even at the point of the governor's office in terms of relationships. There is also, I think, some hopeful things happening on the federal level with the new executive orders from President Biden. And I'm hoping with more of a national push for the type of equity that he's doing, that we can see more action happening in Maine. There is much more that has to be done with the settlement. We really didn't go far enough, and I think we still need to continue that work.
Ambassador Dana?
I almost feel like I don't have anything left to say that Representative Perry didn't say. She hit everything right on the head. Thanks for letting me join today. I can give some updates on what we're looking at legislatively, and I know that Representative Newell has a slew of bills in as well. I think it would be great to hear her bill titles. They're excellent. So Representative Perry is exactly correct that Representative Talbot Ross will be resubmitting the large omnibus bill that we saw in the 129th legislature. And there are a few changes this time around. We've taken out gaming completely and made it its own standalone bill. So that will likely go to the VLA committee. It may go to judiciary, but we're figuring that out. So we're looking at the large bill with the task force recommendations will be going into judiciary. We also have this gaming bill, and the gaming bill will be sponsored by Representative Ben Collins. And the strategy there is, you know, we're making gaming its own thing because it seems to very much be its own thing. And that's about where we're at. So I think a lot of the education around gaming is, you know, the tribes have heard throughout history that Maine isn't opposed to gaming, it's opposed to tribal gaming. And I think we have a lot of evidence to that effect. So you know, a lot of times we hear, well, no, we're not going to expand it at all, but we've seen hard evidence that that the tribes have been blocked in that. So it's not really about the act itself or how we feel about it. It's that gaming is part of tribal sovereignty and you know, needing to have access to these federal acts, even though we live under a settlement act. Another change, we've thankfully taken out the Violence Against Women Act recommendation that was in those in the original bill, because we were able to make that into law on the 129th. We expanded Violence Against Women Act jurisdiction to the Penobscot and Passamaquoddy tribes because we have tribal courts. I believe the legislation would make it so that other tribes could be added if they set up tribal courts as well. And I think that action highlights why this is all so important. So the tribes were blocked from Violence Against Women Act resources, jurisdictional provisions, all of that sort of thing because of the 1980 Settlement Act. And that's just one of the, you know, 150 or so acts that have passed in these 40 years that we haven't had access to because of that language in the Settlement Act. And it's had ramifications on many levels. And with that VAWA Act, we saw it in a very real way where we couldn't get help for domestic violence victims because of these jurisdictional problems, because nobody wanted to touch these cases. We're re-traumatizing victims. And so that's just one very blatant example of how this is operating in our communities. And that's one of many. The Settlement Act has been oppressive. I think we can all point to that document and the interpretation of that document really undermining tribal sovereignty. So when I look at your broad questions that you're posing for your group to think about, let's look at what we're doing right now in the legislature, and that is trying to bring Maine tribes into parity with every other tribe in the country. And some of those tribes also live under state settlement acts as well, but they haven't been held under the thumb like we have here in Maine. I definitely appreciate that Representative Perry talked about the Permanent Commission on Racial, Indigenous, and Tribal Populations in Maine. I serve on that commission, as does Vice Chief Newell, Vice Chief Sillaboy, and Councillor St. John from Maliseet. And that work over the summer, working with representatives and senators, looking at these bills through a lens of racial equity, really planted some important seeds. And in my work since, you've really seen the fruits of that labor, I think. Even though we didn't enter a special session, we didn't get to look at all those bills. We're seeing a lot of them come back this session, and I'm seeing lawmakers thinking about tribal sovereignty, thinking about ramifications on frontline communities and BIPOC people. So I think that it felt really frustrating that our work got shut down due to the pandemic last year. But this time we've really used to strategize and to have these important discussions, and it feels hopeful going into this session. I think that's all I had. If you'd like to talk more about specific legislation, also the Kineo recognition bill, I can give a little bit of an update on that if there's an appetite for it, or if you want to talk more about the Settlement Act and we can come back to that, just let me know.
Paul, I guess I take your lead, my lead from you on that.
Okay. I guess I can give a brief update. So there is a group of people wanting to create the Kineo Band of Maliseet Indians in the Moosehead Lake region. And it's a gentleman who's a Maliseet tribal member, has organized, I think it's around 140 people, and they want to make their own band recognized by the state of Maine, not federally recognized, and no claim to specific land. They just kind of want a piece of paper saying that they're a recognized tribe in the state of Maine. There was kind of some commotion over the past week if this bill was actually going to go through the process, and it looks like right now that it is. It's scheduled for a public hearing on February 2nd. And I can say that Penobscot Nation will be opposing this bill. We see it as really undermining a lot of the important structures in place for federally recognized tribes. And all legitimacy of the claim aside, there needs to be a process for something like this that is more than a 2-sentence bill kind of put together without meeting any criteria. All of our tribes have met numerous levels of criteria to be a tribe. We've operated as government entities for time immemorial. So to have kind of a group come in and seek, recognition like this is concerning for us. So that's about where it's at right now. I think we're still strategizing our opposition around it. But I'm open for questions and discussion.
So Mullion, the Paul Downing, did they, are they using any of the language of the land claim settlement on this 25 or more people separating themselves and creating their own reservation? And are they registered members, or do you know, are they registered members of the Maliseet, the Holton Band?
I believe that one of them is a tribal member with Holton Band of Maliseet, and no, they're not using the language from the Settlement Act about breaking away. It basically, it's a very brief bill. It says the Kineo Band of Maliseet Indians will receive state recognition and won't receive federal recognition or claims to land.
Okay.
Malene, the last thing I heard from Chief Sabatis was that she had spoken with David Slager, and he says he intends to pull the bill, and that was what I heard last. Have you heard the same?
Yeah, as
Or-
of yesterday, he would like to put it back in.
Oh, okay. Yeah,
Yeah,
she did tell me that on Monday. So okay. Okay.
Yeah, if I could jump in. Zeke, go ahead. You all set, Zeke? Yeah.
Yep, I'm good.
Just want to add to what Ambassador Dana said in terms of what the other tribes, the recognized tribes have had to go through. We've, to be recognized as a tribe, you have to have some, proof that you've resided in a certain area. You have to have a territorial area that you've resided in since time immemorial. You have to have a kind of a census procedure to govern your who can be a member of your tribe. You have to show that you have a continuous operating tribal government since time immemorial. And so the existing, Wabanaki tribes in Maine have had to go through some pretty rigorous review to become recognized. And this bill seems like there's a group of folks that are just trying to short circuit the whole process, move to get state recognition first. I don't think that's appropriate. And also, I do know that just from earlier discussions, that one of the ideas that Mr. Slager had was to see if they get state recognition, that they would seek to establish their reservation on Sugar Island in Moosehead Lake. Sugar Island is designated under the Land Claims Settlement Act as eligible to be put into trust by either the Passamaquoddy or the Penobscot tribes. And so that's problematic from our tribe as well. As Molly mentioned, the Penobscot Nation is opposed to this bill. We believe that the area that they're talking about is actually indigenous to Penobscot Nation. So I just wanted to add that. Thank you.
I'd like to add a little also, as far as I know, that there is no process whatsoever that the state has in regard to whether it's state or federal recognition. There is nothing there. I mean, it's hard enough. I appreciate what John Banks had just mentioned, but it's hard enough on us that even the federally recognized tribes are still trying to get proper recognition from the state. And here we have a group of people that, what I know, only one person in that group that is actually a member of the tribe, and I take it personally, the fact that it is traditional, as John put it, indigenous Penobscot territory. So, for someone to come in that way, and like Ambassador Dana mentioned, 2-sentence proposed, bill, without anything going along with that. I know people from I don't know how many state recognized tribes across this continent, and there was a process. But the thing is, they also have a history, from time immemorial. and for a band, a group of people to come in here. I mean, and I was made aware of the fact that there's even another group that trying to be proposed by Henry Bear along St. John, and basically he established himself as the chief. So we're for this a bill like this that has no substance to go through, what does that open up to? What does that open the state up to? Not to mention the problems that it creates, for the federally recognized tribes that you know arise even with the existing problems that we may have. See, anyway, so I just thought I'd throw in my 2 cents. Thank you.
The Mousy Chief and Council had a meeting to discuss this, and the way Chief communicated to me is her stance remains the same as the newspaper article from a few months ago, or actually from a while ago, was it is not our place to recognize another tribe. But if this legislation is going to be seriously considered, and there is a process of state recognition that comes in place, we would want a say in that process if this bill is seriously considered.
Sorry, this is Paul Downing again. First, I just want to apologize to Ambassador Dana. Lack of protocol on my part. We have a very long, close personal relationship that does not excuse me lacking the acknowledgement of your position. So I do apologize, Ambassador Dana. Chief Maggie Dana is on the line. So I know that Sandy had sent her an email, and I'm just wondering if Chief Dana has any comments referencing this particular bill.
Hi. Yes, the chiefs did have a call about this, and some of the same things that were already brought up that Molly mentioned, and some others is the process. I guess the malice seats it took them like 6 years to get recognized. So, like what more working on the criteria, the I'm trying to think. I kind of left my trying to remember we talked about, but I'm pretty sure we're not on board with this, and didn't sort with a letter for all of us to sign. Then I heard that he was withdrawing the bill, and then I guess I'm just hearing now that that may not happen, that he's going to keep it in. So what else did we have that state setting a precedent if they did go ahead with this? So I think that's why we wanted to weigh in to let the state know. And I'm pretty sure, I don't know if it's just the Ken, but there may be another one, and I don't recall what it is right now, but there was another one that could be right behind. I think it's Henry Bear. That's because there's the David Slagger, and there's another Henry Bear there's another one that's right behind him. So yeah, those were just trying to get all.
Question.
That's pretty much it. I think everything, what everybody else said already is pretty much some of the same things we said as well.
Thank you, Chief. Go ahead, John.
Yeah, with this discussion, it becomes obvious that our debating it is almost moot. The entire tribal representation, as we know it, without any new members, are against it, and I think that let the tribes take care of their internal, how would I say, debates and opinions on this, as far as I'm concerned.
And I'll caveat off of what you just said, John, is that this was part of the reason that we had that email discussion before as to whether MITSC would be any part of this. And based on the tribal response, we included it. John asked for it to be included, Mr. Banks. But I will stick with my same position on it. This is outside of what MITSC's supposed to be doing, and we allow the tribes to do what the tribes are going to do independent of us. And this should have been a hands off from my perspective.
I'd like to weigh in on that, Paul. The thing is MITSC does have a role to play here. You know, I mean, you can say, you know, well, it should be going off to the tribes, and you know, sure, but what is MITSC's role? We look at how the things the relationships, and you know, the effects of all, you know, the policies and legislation that's put forth that's going to affect these, you know, federally recognized tribes, you know, that are, you know, involved in this settlement act and the main implementing act. Okay, now to allow something like this to go through, you're darn right it's going to affect the Penobscot Nation, the Passamaquoddy Nation, the Maliseet Nation, as well, you know, even though Aroostook Band of Micmacs doesn't fall under the purview of this commission, but it will also affect them. So now we, you know, as a commission, do not have to go, you know, set forth a comment for or against this you know, this what I refer to as a ridiculous attempt at legislation. But we do have a responsibility to weigh in and comment and give the appropriate legislative body our view as to how it's going to affect the tribes that are involved in that the Maine Indian Tribal State Commission had a responsibility to represent as well. So, you know, as far as moot, it's not moot. We have a responsibility to voice what this commission sees or views. It doesn't have to be for or against, but what we see as how it's going to affect. Leland.
Yeah, I'll jump in there too, if I might. I agree with Bert. Just speaking for this commissioner, if it's important to the tribes, it's important to me as a commissioner. It's that simple. And even more so if it's important to the tribes and their relationship with the state, it's double important to me as a commissioner. And this seems directly relevant in terms of tribal state relations and how a tribe does or doesn't come into relationship with the state. So I think if this isn't in our purview, I'd want to have a conversation of what would be. I totally agree with Bert, and I personally, as a commissioner, totally agree with what both tribal ambassadors and the chief have said today. I sit with the tribes on this, and I think it is a MITSC issue.
So having said that, would excuse me, Paul Tebow.
Yes.
Would we have a motion to make this a MITSC agenda item and to write a position paper on it? I mean, I don't know. And I was just reading back through the emails. In the language of the land claim settlement, it identifies the tribes that comprise the MITSC. And I'm listening to Bert, and I don't necessarily agree with all he says, but if we weigh in on the tribal perspective, then should we in fact create that position paper to present? I'm just kind of at a loss. Or do we make a motion and ask, does the commission itself want to? Like, this is new to me, so I'm relying on you.
Well, I don't know that MITSC has taken a position before on an issue similar to this. I know it came up regarding the Westgate Sipu up in Aroostook County a few years ago, but I don't think MITSC actually testified or took a formal position. I could be wrong on that. I want to note first, before I go on, that Zeke and Sarah had their hands up. So I want to make sure we're not cutting them off.
Yeah, thanks for that, Paul. Chief Sabatis just sent me a statement she'd like me to share with everyone here. She says tribal state relations within Maine have a long and complex history. While we are in the midst of working towards passage of task force recommendations for changes to that relationship, it feels counterintuitive to entertain a bill for state recognition of another tribe that gives up the rights that we are working so hard to regain. Being a tribal nation is sacred, and verification of such claims are necessary to protect the identity of our people and our ancestors. The federal process for acknowledgement is based in statute, and demonstration of certain criteria is required for recognition or acknowledgement. When state recognition has taken place in other areas of the nation, they've established commissions or Office of Indian Affairs that oversee the process, which also requires verification of certain criteria. We fear that recognition of the tribe through a bill that does not require a process could set a precedent. With no burden of proof, even those without indigenous ancestry could use the same method to gain recognition to exploit services and programs for Indians on the backs of our ancestors. And that's all.
And Paul, if I may, I think Sarah was also raising her hand.
I understand why this is of interest to people, but because I'm a soon to be new member, I hope, I've been reading quite a bit, and under the statutory responsibilities of this commission, there are 4 items. One of them is relationships, and it specifically refers to reviewing the effectiveness of the act and the social, economic, and legal relationship between the various tribes. Another one deals with land acquisition, another one with fishing rules, and the fourth is about studies. There's and also petitions by the tribes for designation as extended reservations. So there are 5 things. There's nothing in there about either proposing or taking positions on legislation. So while I think this is very very interesting from a number of standpoints, I don't think it's something that the commission itself should take a position on. However, individual members of the commission are certainly free to act on their own and testify on their own behalf or submit testimony, but not as a member of the commission.
Sarah, this is Paul. Could you drag your computer screen down? Literally all we can see is your forehead.
Oh, sorry about that. I have a cat that keeps trying to get in the picture. I was trying to push him out.
We saw that too. So I'll throw this, and I love playing devil's advocate, and I love, stirring the pot and kicking the hornet's nest. Going back to what Bert and John Ambassador Dana, and now Chief Sabatis. So while it doesn't fit the concise language of the MITSC roles and responsibility, would it not be prudent for the 5 tribes, and I say 5, but the 4 tribes that are represented on MITSC, not to just sit back and not have a position? And even though it seems like a majority of the commission is in opposition to the Kineo Band, and it would detract from the overall relationship of Maine and those established FRTs, federal recognized tribes.
Yeah, I think it would be. Yeah, as I said, yeah, I think, I guess in my little rant there, it's, I think that MITSC does have a responsibility because it's proposed legislation that will affect the tribes. Okay, and you can read off those particular sections, whether it's fishing or land acquisition and stuff like that. But one of the things you have to realize, if you read all the way through the Settlement Act, or the responsibility for MITSC, it is to look and see, voice according to how it's going to affect these tribes. I mean, if we just allow anything, I mean, if we don't step up and at least comment what our views, what we see that may affect the relationship between the tribes, because it would. When you think about it, something like that for the state to pass legislation such as this in the way that they're asked, being asked to do, you're darn right it's going to have an effect on every one of the tribes that exist now. So Maine Indian Tribal State Commission, yes, we don't have to do something, as I said, for or against, but we should at the very least, explain how it may affect the tribes that we represent and that relationship.
Excellent, Bert. So I'll go back to my original question, Paul Thibault. Would it be prudent to ask if there's a motion to either create a position paper or a stance, or do we want to put this as a new agenda item to further discuss it? What do you recommend in your role as the executive director?
Well, I mean, this really came to be back on the agenda. There was an earlier discussion about this in emails, and then it didn't appear it was going to be an issue for MITSC. But then I was specifically asked by legislative staff whether MITSC was going to be taking a position on that bill, and so I felt I should let that be known to the commissioners that the commission had been asked that. I guess it seems to me that given the discussion that has occurred, that it would be appropriate if someone wants to frame this as a motion, and then the commission can decide how it wants to proceed or not.
Wait, but beforehand, I would like to say that I would like the opportunity to speak to my leadership before participating in a vote like that.
Okay. So could we table this and re-energize it on the next meeting, Paul?
Can I step in real quick? The problem with that idea is supposedly this is being put on the agenda for the Judiciary Committee on, what was it, February 2nd, which is, well beyond, before our next scheduled meeting. So
I'd like to make a motion, please.
Mr. Cashwell?
Yeah, I move that the commission write a letter that this legislation was discussed, that it was unanimous amongst the tribes that this bill should not be passed. While it's not a testimony of the commission, it's a sense of the commission, and we support our tribes in that place. You can write that any way you want.
Second.
So we have a motion and a second. Do we have any further discussion as to writing a letter?
Nope.
I guess I missed the exact contents of that letter. Sorry.
We haven't framed it up.
Well, I think John did frame it up, though. Could you just say that one more time, John? I think that was really well said.
I haven't had enough to drink to say it twice the same way.
Oh
But
my God.
it's the sense of the commission after discussions with the commission, within the commission. It's a sense of the commission that the unanimous position of the tribes as stated against this legislation. I don't know, you know what I mean. I can't do it twice. Paul, you can write it out right.
I feel like I've got the gist of that, and you were pretty close to saying it the same way.
As Zeke said, a review from all of us for the content, especially the tribes.
Okay.
Go ahead, Zeke.
From my leadership, the direction I've received is not to involve ourselves, essentially. Writing a letter would be involving ourselves.
Okay.
Well then.
That's why that is why it really. So I guess we can frame it up, Mr. Tebow, based on what John said, that it's the sense of the executive director and chairman of the MITSC that the membership does not think this a good move forward for the tribes. I think we have to leave out unanimous because of the fact, John, that Chief Sabata said, no, we're hands off.
Fine. However, this is like I started this whole thing with this is an issue of the tribes. And when they decide how they want to deal with it, we'll be supportive. Doing nothing and letting you guys deal with it is just fine with me too.
But you made a motion. We had a second. We're having discussion. Paul Tebow, you started to speak and I cut you off.
Oh, I was just saying that I think I captured basically what John Cashwell was stating for a motion, and so
who seconded it?
Kevin, I believe.
Hey. Okay.
Kevin.
So at this point, I guess I'm just is there more discussion, or is there gonna be a vote?
Put it to a vote at this time. Lacking any further discussion.
Bob had a question.
Mr. Chairman.
Oh, go ahead.
I'm sorry. I don't mean to drag this out, but I've been enjoying the issue. I want to circle back to those of us who read the statute. I think I've been through this with Paul Downing before. It's one of those statutes you can read either way. It says the commission is concerned with the social, economic, and legal relationships between the three named tribes and the state. And I think what we've heard the native representatives saying is that the proposed bill would sure have an effect on them. And right. I wonder if somebody in the state might not expect MITSC to be able to answer, and what effect would it have on the state?
Right.
That's it.
So, excuse me, continuing forward, is there any further discussion on this in reference to the motion made to write a position letter supporting the tribes of the commission and the majority of the commission? And it was seconded. If there's no further discussion, I'd like to put it to a vote. All in favor, say aye.
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 And any opposition? I don't know who the 2670911 is, but they keep populating on my phone.
That's me, Sam St. John from HBMI.
Are you opposing the letter?
No.
Okay. Do we have any abstentions?
Zeke. So, okay, if I could, I understand Zeke is abstaining. Did Sam vote? Sam?
No, I didn't abstain.
You're not abstaining.
No, not abstaining.
So, do you have that recorded, Paul Tebow?
Yes, well, we have a recording of this meeting, yes.
Oh, okay.
I'm sorry, the maybe change that. I can vote in favor of it as well. Just
okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, then I take it that I should take John's motion and draft up a a proposed letter, circulate it first to Paul, and then we'll circulate it to the full group. Correct?
That sounds good to me. And can we do this by tomorrow? If the legislation is meeting on the 2nd, Paul, how long will it take you to get this generated and then to the commission?
I don't know. I could probably do it tomorrow, certainly by Friday.
Okay.
You know,
Shouldn't take more than 5 sentences.
Yeah, and the fact that the hearing is next week, I mean, I guess, yeah, ideally you'd like this to be done within that time frame, but that's, I mean, the bill isn't going to be passed through a legislature on February 2nd, so.
Gotcha, I see.
I do think that, to John Catchwell's point again, that less is more on this. John's motion was really tight and succinct, and I think the letter literally could be 5 or 6 sentences almost. I agree with that. I think just right to the point, tight, less is more. Easy to move forward with.
Got it.
I'll agree. So the last item that I'm looking at is future meeting schedule, and we're already over by.
Paul, if I could,
go ahead.
I know we're past time, but I wanted to give Representative Babbage an opportunity to make any comments that he wants to, or to just extend to him, if he prefers, since we've kept him, even past our scheduled time, that we could extend the invitation to him to just, join us in the next meeting when he would have, adequate time to talk with us. So I would I suggest we defer to Representative Babbage on that.
I concur. I apologize.
Good afternoon. I have, and I'm delighted to see MITSC so viable and strong after when I was elected in my last round here 6 years ago. I know that it was fairly dormant, and so it's great to hear. And thank you for all of your participation. I'm prepared to make a few comments, but I will defer to what your schedules are right now, because I don't have anything until 3. So you want to cut it off now? Is that what you're saying?
Not me.
Well, you can say whatever you want, but we're losing people from 1 o'clock.
Yeah. Well, let me introduce myself anyway. Because I'm on the Judiciary Committee, and as a matter of fact, this discussion about the Kineo band interests me, and I don't want this discussion to happen now, but if you can give me any information on membership, I guess, is determined by each tribe. But I used to teach in Greenville, and I remember I had a boy, Malice boy, who was having difficulty getting through. So I worked with him a great deal in order to get him to graduate. But I'm not aware of much of a community, and I wondered if that made a difference. And so if anybody would let me know if it even matters if a substantial number is more relevant to this application, I'd be interested in that. That's all. Okay, so the reason I want to talk to you, Paul made an invite for me to come by. He said that Representative Perry is going to speak, and that there were a couple, and he had some big, 30,000 foot questions is what I call them. But the question that I got was basically about the role of MITSC, and was it adequate, and should the relationship between the state and the tribe revert to what it was in the 1970s? Honestly, I don't know if I have the expertise to even comment on that. But we have, one of the reasons I ran again 2 years ago was because this was going to be a better environment to go forward. And so an awful lot has happened, specifically the creation of this group again, as a viable group, and some of the legislation that's come before us has been very important. But since the Wabanaki Alliance did rate legislators, and they rated as champions people who supported the Permanent Commission on the Status of Racial and Ethnic Populations, I voted for that. Columbus State Indigenous Peoples Day, I voted for that. Ban Native American Mascots, I voted for that. Update classifications of waters, I was supportive of that. And I think the biggest thing that we are very proud of being a part of getting it through was VAWA, the Violence Against Women Act. So all of those things. But I do know that there was a classification of a different group that complete disinterest in working collaboratively, protect large corporate interests, outright hostility, and a 0% on the legislative scorecard. And it may have been done alphabetically, but my name was at the top of the list. So that's not accurate, and I just wanted you to know that. I will explain, however, that this is my 6th term on the Judiciary Committee. I've been a high school social studies teacher for 4 decades. Began in Greenville and am now in Kennebunk. I've always been liberal thinking, but consider myself pragmatic. And in the classroom or outside, whether it's with like-minded people or people with opposite viewpoints, I'm the one who usually asks, have you considered this? And so during 2094, which was the omnibus bill, which you're well familiar with the task force recommendations, I probably was more of an interrogator than anybody else to try to find out answers to questions. And I will confess to that role. I took it on myself to try to really understand this, and it's very important to me, and I spend a lot of time doing so. So I mean, I have no agenda to speak of. When I got elected, my important issues were environmental stewardship and gender equity. But Mortimer Adler said justice is the highest value, and that's been my mission. On every day I said the Pledge of Allegiance, right? But we'd have a discussion about that. The pledge is less important to me than to the flag than to the final 5 words: liberty and justice for all. And that's my license plate. So I like to walk the walk. So with regard to what happened in the 129th, we did have 2094. We also had 1392. I don't know if you're familiar with the legislation, but 1392 was a abbreviated version. It hit some very big points. I almost thought that it was prepared for me because it hit the points that I thought I could agree on. The final amendment, before we had to vote on it, was brought to our attention on the morning of the meeting, and the Attorney General's office had questions that couldn't be answered, and so I couldn't vote for the bill as presented. But both on 2094 and 1392, I had an ought to pass minority report, which was even more abbreviated, but it was a stuff that I could sign on to, and until I knew more, I could go with some of the rest of it. So to let you know, um, uh, I've only proposed 8 or 10 bills this time around, but 2 of them do have to do with something you'd be interested in. The minority report for 1392 and 2094, which is identical from me, I have put forward as at least a starting point. You know, I have come upon these decisions as to what's appropriate or what I can sign off on at this time before I learn more, pretty much alone. I have not consulted with the governor, but I know as the final, um, what would you call it? The final, the buck stops there, on her desk. As that might be a hurdle. She's going to be more cautious than probably anyone before stepping forward. So I don't know if my bill to that starts with my minority report will be helpful or not, but I want to be on the record for saying where I am in agreement. Basically, what the bill does is it establishes a designated territory, which is primarily the Penobscot and St. Croix watershed, and then going north to the Canadian border, with slight differences so that you can go latitude and longitude. I tried to include all lands that were in that area that were designated by the settlement, or not designated by the settlement, but have been purchased by tribes since, so that it falls within that at least. And extended to the end of this decade the ability to fulfill the total acreage to be purchased that was permitted in the act. And I also signed on to, I think, pretty much all of the judiciary expansions that were proposed in the task force. As far as the tax part of it, I did not sign into that, but I think there's areas there. Since that time, I've spoken with the governor, and she said she thought that they were close to having some sort of agreement on that before before folks went a different direction. So I'm betting that that's an area where there'll be some compromise as well. So that's one bill I have in. The other bill I have in, I don't consider 2094 or 1392 to be a reparations bill. That's not. This is a path forward bill in my point of view. But my concern primarily as just a Southern Maine citizen whose family has been here for a long time and concerned about all Maine citizens is what about the future of Native American kids in the state? Are they going to have educational opportunities? Is their health care going to be prepared for? We don't even have that, and I would consider myself middle class, or I have no toys or no camp or any of that, but I live well, and uh, uh, and we don't have educational or health care guaranteed. But I do think that's something we could do for our native population. But as I look at some of the things that I know the state does provide a K through 12 subsidy. Those numbers just came out. I guess I haven't checked for you folks, but I mean the allocation that will be coming up for K through 12 education is K through 8 probably in most of your situations. But um, also, I know that I looked into providing a waiver for tuition for the state university, but I understand that's in existence right now. So I said, well, I know that the Penobscots early on were very took the initiative with gaming in the 1970s. I'm not a friend of gaming. That's where we probably are going to go in a different direction. But I do feel badly the Penobscots were doing so well with Beano or Bingo, whatever we called it, in the early days, and then of course the McCusick decision of 1983 put an end to that, and so I do know that they were instrumental in getting Foxwood started, but of course had a 4-year contract, and after 2 years were bought out by Foxwood, so they didn't have an ongoing benefit there. But since that time, there have been dozens of requests to have a casino to the state legislature. And I know Chief Francis has expressed frustration with this. The fact that we've adopted casinos, but not an Indian casino. And I have to tell you that my record is very consistent with the fact that I wanted to share the numbers with you. I probably am not going to find it here when I need it, but anyway, we all know the story about gaming. We know that uh, the intent originally was for Scarborough Downs to have slot machines. That was not even the main issue. The main issue was a casino in York County. Well, casino in York County was rejected overwhelmingly. The slot machine question never got any attention at all. But an awful lot of people said, "Well, who cares about slot machines at Scarborough Downs? It's like a sequestered campus. You know, that's a different question." And it passed by the skin of its teeth. But then, of course, you know the story. Scarborough said no, and Bangor said, "We have a raceway, so we're eligible." And of course, we have Hollywood slots, and that was the end of, well, it was actually the court decision, I guess, that brought the end of the Penobscot gaming. But my point is, then casinos finally got passed by a 50.5% vote for Oxford Casino, and then Hollywood slots later upgraded. So that I do feel badly that if we have gaming in Maine, it's not an Indian casino. So I have a bill in that why don't Oxford and Hollywood, why don't a portion of those proceeds go to the Native Americans? They're the ones that started the whole gaming idea anyway in the state of Maine. And of course, I discovered that Oxford does give 4% of its slots now to the tribes. So my bill is to provide 5% for as long as there are only 2 casinos in Maine. That and I'm not supporting more, but given that premise, if that's the way it's going to remain, then the state share should be increased of the Hollywood and Oxford casinos to be equal partners, 50% of both net income of both slots and tables, and that 5% of both slots and tables for both casinos would go to the tribes, would go to the 4 federally recognized tribes. And who's going to decide who that money goes to? Well, you probably won't like this, but what I had proposed was 1 member from each of the 4 recognized tribes to be added to this body, MITSC, to convene one time or for one purpose until that purpose is ended, to determine the formula by which monies from the casinos would be distributed. I don't know now how Oxford's money, the 4% is distributed between the Passamaquoddies and the Penobscots, if it's 50-50 or whatever, I'm not familiar. But I figured that's getting into the weeds for somebody like me to dictate. I actually approached this bill with a total reallocation of where the state monies would go. Harness racing is in the decline, as you know, and they get quite a bit of Hollywood. So I didn't know, but that might be money better used. But basically, that second bill of mine is merely to increase the percentage, and of course Hollywood gives nothing to the Indians, so they would now be required to. And the gaming percentage is the big one that's a change for the casinos, at least, because Hollywood slots already gave 4% of net income. So So to 5% each, and to pay for it by increasing the state share to 50% of net income from both casinos. Those are the two bills that I have before you in this legislature. But I am open-minded, and what will change my mind is new information. So, if people say, "Hey, Chris, vote for this or vote for that," it's great for me to know that people feel that way. But what really would change my mind would be, or to help me to make a decision, would be why they feel that way. What's the basis of your thinking? So thank you for inviting me. Thank you for holding on after a long meeting. I know what it's like. I've been having Zoom after Zoom, and it can be tough in the later parts of the day.
Thank you very much, sir. Paul, Thibault?
If there aren't any questions back at Representative Babbage, then I think we are at the point of talking about scheduling the next meeting.
Paul, could I say something? I don't know if I mentioned this at the beginning, but if you do have a comment on the Kineo issue, Sue Panett is our clerk, and contacting the clerk of the committee will get you an opportunity to testify if you choose to on that bill. Or you could obviously write something to the clerk and just have it be written testimony that would be sent to us via email.
Yeah, I think we're contemplating that a written submission, but thanks for that, Chris.
Okay.
So I wish more people were still on the call, Paul, because this strikes to the matter of our future meeting schedule.
Yeah.
And I know there's tremendous resistance to not meet on a more regular basis, whether it monthly, but and there was that let's do it, once a quarter or whatever it was decided upon. But looking at today's meeting is an exact reason why that we should be meeting monthly until we call this list down or refine it to where it's going to be presentable, etc. Right?
Well, I agree, and we had things we could not get to. Representative Newell has several bills in the works that are, they're not the big bill that Marlene was discussing, but there are other specific bills we haven't even touched on those.
Right. And did we even open up new business?
Well, we kind of reshuffled it so there wasn't any. The broadband thing didn't pan out because that fellow wasn't going to show up to present, and then we moved the Kineo band up, so that took care of new business.
Okay.
I mean, you know my feeling. I think at this point, while we're in Zoom and limited to a couple hours at a time, and the legislature in session, I think we need to have monthly meetings. So.
Right.
And I agree with that.
And Bert, some of the big pushback, literally some of the big pushback has been, our time constraints. But under previous MITSC meetings, if you guys did a retreat, hell, it would take 3 or 4 Zooms meeting just to do what the travel to one of those events would be. You know what I mean? So I don't understand this pushback of not meeting more.
Yeah, I mean, I have no pushback. I mean, I actually agree that we should, especially with the situation as it is with this pandemic. We're forced to do it, come in here through this, and my eyes are watering because I'm sitting looking. You're thinking I'm crying because of the stuff we're discussing, but it's because I keep having to look at this dang screen. But with everything that's going on, and especially here, we've got a new president, all that stuff, and things are moving around. Plus, so that being the case, it's going to be moving around with the state as well as with the tribes. So it's important that we pay, you know, give the opportunity to be able to come together and discuss what's going on, you know. And so, you know, I mean, when it slows down, yeah, maybe we can go to quarterly meetings, but I think right now we do need to come together a little more frequently. You know, we're only going with 2 hours. Usually our in-person meetings are longer than that, you know. And so, you know, and there we have to drive, you know, we have to travel
Exactly.
spots. Here, you know, I have a problem with any, you know, sitting there complaining about having to be here for a couple hours. You know, we can see that it's evidently not enough time. And
Right.
so, you know, I would like to go back, you know, go with at least the monthly meetings, you know, for the time being. It doesn't have to be a permanent thing, but until we can actually slow down, you know, things slow down and we can get back to some normalcy.
So, Paul, would that be a possibility of sending out an email, just asking the commission as a whole to see if we could, in fact, meet in February rather than going all the way to March?
Yeah, I could, I mean, the last time we did a doodle poll, actually the last couple of times, I think I could do that again.
Yep.
Unless, you know, I think that's probably what we ought to do. It's awfully hard to guess
Absolutely.
one time, but, and I guess I'd shoot for the tail end of February and the beginning of March as the time frame for the poll.
I would almost, yeah, more February than March, because
Okay.
I think we need to meet in March.
Well, when I say March, I meant like the first couple of days of March. I haven't got
Okay.
the right in front of me, but I think I think that last week of February spills over into the very beginning of March.
Yeah. So
That's
I just think that that's prudent, and until we catch up, and you know, for me, we've Representative Newell, Ambassador Dana. There's going to be things that are going on the floor that I think this commission needs to be aware of as it occurs, not getting a memorialized document 3 months down the road. You know what I mean? And having real-time updates from these two incredible women, I think is going to benefit this commission. Or I shouldn't say incredible, dynamic women with what they're doing.
Yeah, I would say that.
Oh, John Banks is trying to get on here.
Yeah, I was just going to suggest that since we are running out of time and we're not going to be able to hear fully from Ambassador Dana and Representative Newell, that we get a list of those bills that we were going to talk about today. If we're not going to have time to discuss them, I'd like to at least be able to do some research on my own in the meantime on whatever bills are in the legislature that could affect tribal-state relations.
Yeah, I can definitely do that, John. A lot of them are titles right now, don't have LD's number yet, but I can send you all the titles that we're working with right now. We went over a good chunk today, but yeah, Representative Newell has quite a few in as well that would definitely be worth all of you looking at.
Yeah, if you could get those to Paul Tebow, that would be great, and he can get them out to the rest of the commission.
Maybe I could ask, I guess I would ask Ambassador Dana and Representative Newell, am I right that the LG process is taking longer than it normally would? We're at the end of January and we have hundreds of LGs that still haven't come out.
I think, Paul, you have to keep in mind, we did kind of start a little bit later. They are coming back out, and my last understanding, I'm not sure, was it 200 bills had been referred out to the committee. But if you recall, Paul, I sent you a list.
Yeah, I do have that earlier list. Yeah.
I have a list compiled by my legislative aide of approximately 32 bills that we're kind of monitoring. And we'll definitely add that additional one that Representative Babbage was speaking about. And I did forward over the draft copies, Paul, just prior to the meeting of those two particular bills that I was talking to you about.
Okay. Well, I will update with anything that the two of you send me in addition. I will update that list and get it out to the commissioners. And I'm going to just keep tracking. I mean, every day I look to see which LDs have come out. And I guess I'll just keep doing that.
Excellent. So, Paul, you can get that together for us. Then we can do the doodle poll. Let's try for that later part. Oh, Representative Babbage just posted in the chat the 1787, and I think it was 1780 something just populated. And I apologize to everyone if I don't see your hand raised. Operating off of just the phone, all I see is the speaker and a little tiny icon of myself. I don't see anything else. So, and I don't even know what I look like. I might have food in my teeth, etc. So I don't know. But I wanted to thank everyone. And I think at this point, because I'm starving, is there a motion to adjourn today's meeting?
Motion.
Seconded? Do we have a second?
Yes.
Cool. So having a motion, having a second, all in favor say aye.
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 Anybody that wants to keep talking, you'll be talking to yourself because we're out.
I'd just like to say thank you. Thank you again for having me. And to the chair, I think certainly you can go back from dynamic to incredible.
Okay.
Thank you, folks. Thanks for the invitation.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Paul, I'll touch base with you after I eat.
Okay.
All right, brother.